Do you ever wonder what steps do you exactly need after you've taken a case in order to provide the right prescription at stage 3? So the mistake most students make is to directly jump off to the repertories, to dump in every symptom and then spend hours going around in circles trying to figure out what remedy to give from the repertorization table, right? And don't get me wrong, I've done it too. But if you could step back and give just a few minutes to pick the right symptoms to analyze, it will make a huge difference between a successful and a failed prescription. Okay? Now, I know it's easier said than done, and hence one of the most common question in my Argentum survey is, how do you do that? I mean, how do you find characteristics in a patient? How do you analyze PQRS? And more importantly, how do you interpret symptoms into right rubrics? So I've been teaching and mentoring beginner and experienced CAM practitioners on how to take, analyze, and prescribe cases regardless of how the patient presents. And I've designed a template that anyone can master this process, right? Now, it's designed to reduce overwhelm, desperation, and give you the confidence on making a prescription that actually works and gets your patient back, right? To demonstrate this, I'm using a case study, which is submitted by my student in my Argentum mentoring portal on how to analyze especially classical cases at stage 3, right? Now, this is part 2. If you've missed part 1, where I cover the case-taking process, then please check that video before you dive into this one. If you watched part 1, let's dive in. So the first thing I do is I go and classify this information into different stages, all right? So in our case, let's look at the information that we have at stage 1. So at stage 1, remember, it's all the diagnostic information, all the basic common information that comes up to you based on their history. So the first thing she says is the severe anxiety and panic. She's been on antidepressants for 25 years, so a lot of drug symptoms would be mixed up with those anxiety symptoms. And she's lost control. She cannot cope with that anxiety. And then it's never been well since menopause. So she's on HRT since then, and menopause has been a huge exciting factor, aggravating factor for her. And what does she want from homeopathy? She says, I want to taper off medications. I want to find my balance and my harmony within myself. So this is important what the patient wants. And this want is at stage 3. That's why our patient is at stage 3. Now let's look at what stage 2 information. Stage 2 is a bit deeper than stage 1, where you start finding some details about the anxiety beyond the diagnosis. And what she says is this whole aspect about cannot deal or cope with the easiest tasks. So she is completely unable to cope with life on a day-to-day basis. She cannot deal with conflict. She cannot deal with noise. She cannot deal with, things around her in the world. She breaks down very often, and there is this complete buildup of overwhelm, confusion. She cannot function. This is stage 2 information. Not every patient with anxiety, panic, and depression will go through this, but it's important because that is what she's presenting with. This is our stage 2 information. And then stage 3. Stage 3 is more deeper. It is more individualistic. It is where you find some deeper connections that you will not easily find in most other people with anxiety. And she talks about these horrible sensations in her body. There is this buzzing, there are these vibrations. It's like this mind-body connection happening here. The buzzing in the mind and the body are the same. She says this heavy, oppressive feeling and sinking in the chest and the throat every day on waking up. Then she gets these severe cramps in her lower abdomen, especially when she's running. She has a lot of vivid dreams, which are very unique, and she has a lot of fears that she came up with very spontaneously. And she talks about hobbies and interests. She talks about running. She talks about having opinions and the corruption in the world. So all this is quite important because that tells us more about her as a person rather than the diagnosis. right? So she has actually given us a lot of stage 3 information. Now, if you look at the template and the strategies, you realize that although she's at stage 3, the student has taken the case at stage 2. Why? Because you see, even though there is information at stage 3, it isn't connected. You do not have qualified connections. You cannot see a clear, see-through understanding of, putting this patient in a few words, putting the understanding of this patient in a few words. You are not yet there. That is why there is confusion for the patient, for the student as well, because this is common. And don't get me wrong, I've been there hundreds and hundreds of times as a beginner when I was in my first year. But this is what you need to understand. And obviously, that something rubs off you as well. You take on the patient's anxiety, you take on the patient's energy of complete confusion. But at the same time, this is our growth as a homeopath to be able to rise above and see what's coming up here, right? So she's at stage 3. What we need to do is bring together that information. This is what we call an analysis and totality, and see this picture and patient as one whole unit, right? That's our job, that's our skill, and that's our gift as a homeopath. So how do you make those connections? Now at stage 3, remember, you're using the classical strategy. This is our bread and butter strategy. This is what homeopathy is great at, right? Now I'm going to use Sankaran's delusion approach here to analyze this case. Why? Because she has a lot of dreams, a lot of interesting beliefs and delusions, and she has fears. So all these things make her appropriate for a delusion approach, right? And the tools that we're going to use are group and kingdom analysis. And I'm going to put a link below this video on how you take a case and analyze it using the stages, template, and strategies. So this is quite new to you, but just be with me here. You'll learn a lot through this case as well, all right? So I've divided these general themes into 3 parts, okay? So this is the topmost. Imagine you're looking from the bird's eye view, and this is this broad spectrum themes that come up in her case based on her journey at stage 3. She speaks about there are issues around survival. In her dreams, remember, somebody was punching her mom. Somebody was on her chest, suppressing her, oppressing her. So it's like this aspect about you versus me. Somebody's stronger than her and she's weaker. She spoke about she was a victim. She was manipulated by her ex. She was abused by her ex. But she chose that state for her. She attracted those type of people in her life. She couldn't get out. She was like a victim trapped in that house. He was stronger than her. And she became completely frozen with panic, anxious, trapped within herself, her mind and her body, and she was losing control. And she was very young. She was about 15. So can you see? This is exactly what's coming up at a very broad spectrum understanding. These are the themes of animal kingdoms, right? So if you understand the kingdom analysis, you will understand that these are the survival issues of remedies that belong to the animal world. Okay, let's go further. Now let's come a bit lower as we are approaching the ground. Let's look at some of the narrower themes coming up within that big spectrum. What are the specific fears that she speaks about? She speaks about this violent death, being attacked, suffocation, and this intense desire to get out and, escape. Remember, she has this panic attack in a car and she has to jump off the car whenever she gets that. She's constricted and oppressed in her throat and chest. And she was trapped in that relationship. She couldn't get out until there was a fire in the last month of her pregnancy, and she was forced to get out or leave that house. She was in this constant panic state with buzzing and vibrating in her body. She felt very, very, small and low self-esteem. She was like vulnerable and exposed. And there was this intense restlessness and hyperactivity. She likes to run. She ran away from her home as a child. She rebelled. She wanted to fit in. She wanted to change because her childhood for her was, again, she was trapped in her parents' home, and she wanted to rebel and sneaked out at night and wanted to change, and then she was trapped in her boyfriend's house. And what she wants is, she feels unloved, she feels completely forsaken, lonely, she wants attention, she wants fame. She's quite ambitious. She's concerned about her social position. She wants to fit in. She didn't want to take drugs, but she did because she wanted to fit in. She was forced, she says she was pressured, but the pressure is from within her. Right? Can you see? This is the more narrow spectrum within that survival zone of animals. These are the themes of the insect group. Right? So that is how you understand from the broad to the narrow. Now, how do I know these? This is how, when you study group analysis and when you study the insects, and we have some really good books on the insect kingdom by Dr. Mehta. I'll put a link for those below if you want to understand insects really well. If you understand these key groups within the homeopathic zone, you can use the group analysis and kingdom analysis very well. Yeah. Now, within that, let's move more to the core. Let's move to the individual zone. What are the PQRS within this broad spectrum zone? What are the highly individualistic symptoms in her? She has this high energy buzz. She says there is fire within her. This need to achieve, to be noticed, to be strong and capable, to be praised. She wants to find her strong voice against a corrupt world. She wants to create a different world. This is the fire within her that is trying to come out. That's been suppressed for such a long time, and that fire is burning her, and that anxiety within her, and that buzzing. Can you see what's happening here? This is her gift. This is her element. She's completely alone and alienated and forsaken. She's very hypersensitive to noise and people around her, and she's addicted to drugs. There's a lot of strong drug-like state in her, and there is a desire for music. Now, at this point, you also need to understand how does she cope, right? And what do you see the way she's coping? There is too much of everything. She's rebelling, she's obsessed. She cannot stay in that state. She's trapped. She wants to jump off and escape. Otherwise, she goes mad and crazy and loses control. She's confused, she's hopeless, she's shut down, she breaks down, she's frozen, and she's paralyzed. Can you see? Such intense coping mechanism. This, at stage 3, indicates the miasm based on Sankaran's analysis. So we're using Sankaran's miasmatic analysis here because we can understand her at stage 3 and she's going towards stage 4. So this is why we are using the Sankaran's miasmatic analysis. You have to use the right miasm for the right patient and the right stage that they are in. To know more about miasms, you will find the information in my miasm free book. Again, I'll put a link of that below. But just be with this understanding. It's very important to know and use the right tools at the right stage. So according to Sankaran's miasmatic analysis, she is from tubercular to syphilitic miasm. And in the family history also, you can see a lot of syphilis in her state, a lot of autoimmune cancer state coming up. Now the question is, which insect? Now this is where you need to understand how to use a database. If there is an insect that doesn't pop up for you, which is fine, most of us do not know every possible insect, but if it doesn't come up for you based on just your Metro Medica information, then that's when you need to use your repertorial analysis. Now there was one interesting part here, if you've realized. She said she was hospitalized in Caribbean after insect bites, not just once, but twice. And this is her connection with the source. This tells us she's hypersensitive. There is idiosyncratic reaction to an insect bite. That shows that she's close to the source. All our patients show some form of affinity for the source. That's homeopathic for you. Now she unfortunately doesn't remember what insect bit her. Doesn't matter. We have other ways of finding out what insect this patient would need. So at this point, I'm going to use my HomeoQuest software and I'm going to use quest analysis. The reason I'm going to use quest analysis because she's showing some beautiful themes, some beautiful symptoms. Now, not all those symptoms can be converted into rubrics. If you do try to, you can use themes. You can use thematic repertories like Jeremy's Q repertory or Mirali's themes from Complete Repertory. But again, it's very hard to find those themes for the words that she's been using. And so I'm going to use quest analysis, which is matching these directly from the provings or matching the patient's words with the prover's words, right? So you bypass the rubric part here. And that is exactly what we want in the end. And this is what technology today can do for us, right? So let me show you how. So in Quest, I went and put some of her keywords, okay, which are peculiar words. Remember the last thing that we derived, the PQRS symptoms, the individualistic symptoms? I put all those important keywords like buzz, high energy, fire, sensitivity to noise, music, forsaken feeling, and appreciation. Okay, so those for me were the key totality words in our patient. And when I analyzed them through our entire database, these were the symptoms these were the remedies that we got, all right? We have some known remedies, obviously, and then we have some unknown remedies here, all right? And so you have sepia, aurum, opium, plutonium, nitricum, hafnium, helium, gallium, xenon, Caloptrix, Cygnus, which is a swan, sapphire, Heliatis, Androctonus, chocolate, and iridium. These cover most of the symptoms. Now, I'm going to use a remedy filter here and I'm going to put in insects because those are the animal groups that we have derived that she's from. Okay, so we have 36 insects here. Let's filter it out and look at that. The first one and the only one that covers most of our symptoms is Caloptrix splendens. At that point, I did not know exactly what that was, but let's go and find out what that remedy is. And that is the Damselfly from Jeremy's dynamic provings. It's been proved by Jeremy. Now, before I come to the remedy, I want to talk about the potency. Why LMs in the first place? Because of her hypersensitivity. She's super sensitive to everything, to energies around the world. And we want to give her LMs because they're gentle, yet they're deep acting, right? And that was the only reason I use LMs. And the other thing is we wanted to use any potency would have done from 1 to 3. She presents at stage 3, between 2 and 3. So I would have preferred to give her LM3 anyway. And that was what was available at Helios. LM1 and 2 were not available. So we started with LM3 in her case. So that's broadly how you should analyze, find the connections and prescribe in a classical case at stage 3, even if you have missing gaps while taking the case, all right? Now, in this case, as you've seen, it was at stage 2, right? Now, the most important part is to check if our prescription is right for a patient, especially when, an unknown remedy is coming up that you have never used before, right? So how do you research new unknown remedies? How do you understand its materia medica at different stages? You need to match the stage of the patient to the stage of the remedy, right? So that's your homework. I want you to go and research this remedy in your own way. And then in part 3, I'll share the exact materia medica understanding and distillation of this remedy at different stages. So this simplifies it for you. Plus, I will share the follow-ups to see how this works in practice, right? So if you enjoyed this video and this process, and if you want to learn more on how to use the stages template, check this short playlist I have over here where I've taught you my stages template and strategies to get you started. Plus, you can get my premium Quest feature in HomeoQuest software, so you can repertorize from the materia medica by using the patient's words, all right? I'll put the links below. And Don't forget to join my free Argentum training that run every February. It shows you the steps on what exactly you do to build a highly successful practice using all different strategies. I'll leave a link for you below. I'll see you in my workshop, hopefully. Take care.